Yeah. Thank you very much for joining this presentation. So it's about the migration from on-premise to SaaS. So Michel and myself have worked on this topic on several projects. So what we will do during this presentation is to give you an overview of what is expected when you migrate, when you pivot from on-premise to SaaS. So the first important thing to understand when you do a Polar migration, so it's a little bit more, I will say, complex that only move your data from your on-premise system to the SaaS system. So what is really important to understand is there is an impact on the background. So you have to make some first one to some choice, and you have also a strategic shift to take in consideration. So we need to understand before you start your project to pivot from E-WorkBook on-premise to Polar SaaS. What is your expectation? So do you want to start with a fresh environment, so with no legacy data, or is it really important for you to keep all your legacy data and then not restart from fresh, but keep your legacy data on the new SaaS environment? If you decide to start with a fresh environment, what you will do with your legacy data? So do you expect to do some archiving of your on-premise data? It's also important to understand how you will manage your multiple environments. So most of the on-premise customers have not only one environment, so they have several environments. So it could be 2, 3, or 4. So most of the time I see 3 or 4 environments. It could be the dev environment, or the dev and the test environment, and also what we call a pre-prod environment and the prod environment. How you would like manage these multiple environments that you have currently on the on-premise system, and what is your expectation on the SaaS environment? So you want to keep the same number of environments, and so we can discuss about that. So if you need more than 1 or 2 non-prod environments, is it really needed? And one thing that we will also take in consideration is your GXP expectation if you are a GXP customer. So if you are non-GXP customer, so you have maybe other expectation. If you have GXP customer, you have certainly a lot of expectation, a lot of constant challenge to fit the regulation expectation. And also, we have also to prepare the non-prod environment. So what I mentioned previously, so if you have multiple environments, so if you have non-prod environment, how you like manage this multiple environment. When I mentioned previously that it's a strategic shift, that means that we will change the way to work with our application, with our platform. If you are an on-premise customer, up to now, you are responsible of more or less everything. So IDBS is responsible of the software, and you, the customer, are responsible of the infrastructure, of the upgrade, monitoring, performance, the database, the backup, everything, in fact. That don't mean that you do it by yourself. Certainly, you have some subcontractor to help you. Maybe you also ask IDBS to achieve some tasks. So, for example, most of the time we're involved on the upgrade project to move your platforms from a release to a new release. But it's always under your responsibility. When you will shift to the cloud, so when it's an IDBS SaaS environment, so Polar SaaS, IDBS will be responsible of more or less everything. So the software, the infrastructure, the upgrade, the monitoring, and we perform a monitoring non-stop, so 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, all the year, 365 days per year. It's certainly more than what your customers are able to do at the moment. We are also responsible of the backup, the security, and the only thing that as customer you will be responsible is the authentication part on the network on your environment, on the customer environment. For the integration, so we can discuss later about that. So it's a shared responsibility. A part is handled by IDBS, a part is handled by you, the customer.
Okay, so I'm going to discuss here some organizational impact that you may see going from on-premise world into the cloud. And the first point is regarding the fact that one of the cloud benefits is to have more flexibility and more scalability of your environment, meaning that typically on the on-premise world, when you have to scale up the system, when you have to onboard a lot of users or new modules, you have to procure the infrastructure side. There's a lot of IT involvement and potentially bottlenecks around those activities that are completely removed regarding when you go on the cloud, and that means that it becomes like a change management exercise rather than just having on top of the change management all of the additional hardware and procurement activities. On top of that, you're going to get regular upgrades, which means that you need to streamline the ability to get those upgrades. And Jeannie Rafat earlier mentioned that in her presentation, the fact that you need to schedule regular trainings for typically non-GXP customers. You get 2 upgrades a year. GXP 1 will get less, but still you'll have a lot more training on the new features that are coming. We'll have to make sure that the documentation is up to date. And there is also something called the cloud value gap. I don't know if any of you have heard about this term. I'm going to talk about it in more detail later, but just as a spoiler, this is the ability to use new features that are coming with upgrades as you get access to this. And then finally, the reduce burden on the IT and QA regarding your platform maintenance, the business continuity, and making the system resilient, having enough redundancies on the system to make sure that it can manage different situations. And that's the same thing with security. Those are quite time consuming on the customer side. So the fact that all of this is now shifted to IDBS means that it's going to free up a lot of resources for you to do other activities. And talking about the security, as you know, we are using AWS as the cloud provider. So AWS take care of the security of the cloud, meaning that the infrastructure security is managed by them. We, as IDBS software vendor, we are responsible for the security in the cloud, so everything related to the software, and we've got a host of features around the security management and making sure that it is well architected, and the customer, your responsibility will come on the authentication and connection to the cloud. Okay, so next one is with Arnaud.
Yeah. So what we notice in terms of motivation from our customers that already pivot from on-premise to SaaS are more or less, I will say, summarized on this slide. So what is expected for them? It's system performance issues that they have currently on the on-premise environment will be solved or fixed by moving to the IDBS SaaS. Why? Because on our SaaS environment, so we have this capability to improve more or less easily the infrastructure. So where it's really hard for a customer to increase the number of server or the capacity of the server, for us in the SaaS environment is not a big deal. There is also, I would say, a complexity of the infrastructure expected for our solution, because we require several application server, we require the Oracle database server, a MongoDB server. So we know our software, we know very well our software, the infrastructure that is expected on the background, and we have also this capability to simplify the management of the IT part, and also to be in control of the TCO that is challenging for the on-premise customer. As mentioned by Michel on the previous slide, so we have also this capability to perform the upgrade faster than on-premise environment, where for a customer on-premise, it's really hard to actually say to upgrade more than one time per year. So most of the time it's each 80 months, 2 years, sometimes a little bit more for a GXP customer. We're able to provide more or less a release when the release is completed. We also, for GXP customer, are able to reduce because we have automated IQ. So this part that is painful for on-premise customer is really simplified on the SaaS environment. And also, what provides the SaaS environment is this capability to data out easily all your data. So we have some advanced future module on our system where it will be not so hard to extract the data and use this data from your other system or use for the AI or ML model.
Okay, so far we talked about the why going to the cloud. Now we're going to dive a little bit about how we're going to get there. And when you start planning this data migration, there are two big phases. The scoping phase, which is about identifying the risks of the potential migration, and the actual delivery. And so if you go into the scoping phase, the heart of this is the technical discovery that Arnaud will discuss on the next slide, I believe. Based on this technical discovery, we're going to identify things that could potentially needs to be considered as part of the migration, and we need to potentially develop some mitigation process or workaround to make sure that when we go to the cloud, they are handled as they should be. And also, based on the database size, there will be different options regarding the actual migration. Arnaud will cover this part later. Once we've identified all of the issues, we can start planning the project and defining a timeline. And we can define also what is the version that you want to go to and the impact of going to Polar. After the scoping phase, then we go into delivery. We're going to talk a little bit later more about this dry run processes, which are basically export, import from your environment to the cloud. And we're going to go through this iteratively until we got a stable way of getting this data. And then potentially some workflow adjustment that needs to be done on the cloud based on what we have found in the technical discovery. Will help you the acceptance testing, and then the post-project support. I have a slide about this on how we can do that.
So, what is really important on this type of project is to be predictable. So we need to be sure that what we do, what we will plan, will be executed as expected. And to do that, so we are not magicians, so there is no magic button that will explain you what is your project plan. If you are not able to do, let's say, scoping phase. Why it's really important? Because we have several on-premise customers that have each one their own specificity. So they have used our product since a few years or since a long time, using different modules in different way, with multiple sites or only one site. So any customer is really specific. So what we have done, we have created a technical discovery document and script that will allow us to understand a little bit more how the customer have used our system during the last couple of years, but also since the beginning. So we will have a better understanding of how our product was used on the on-premise environment of the customer. So we provide an Oracle script and a Word document that should be complete by the customer. So the customer will execute this Oracle script, provide us the result. They will also populate a Word document that provide additional information that we are not able to extract with an Oracle script. We will be able to do an analysis and then provide the feedback to the customer. Then, based on that, we will have a better understanding of where we start from, when we start, what is the customer environment, how our product was used, and we know what is the endpoint. So we will be able to do the scoping of the project, do an estimation of the project, so what is expected by IDBS, but also what is expected on the customer side. We will review this scoping and estimation with the customer. We can do some adjustment based on what the customer can take in charge and what we don't want to take in charge. That will allow us to provide a SOW to the customer. Then the customer will raise the PO and we can start the project. So we have given a range of the average cycle for each of these phases, so more or less for scoping phase. So we don't expect to spend more than 2 weeks to provide the project scope on the SOW with something around 4 weeks, so including the reception of the PO. And when we receive the PO, we should be able to do the kickoff of the project in the next 2 weeks. So that gives a slot of 2 months from the beginning of the discussion on when we can start the project. So of course, so depending of the size of the customer and I will say the complexity of the procurement process and customer side to raise this PO, for example, could take a little bit more longer. But more or less, it's the average that we have noticed based on the previous project. If we come back more on the technical discovery area, so what is the goal? So it's really to define what will be the scope of the project. So what is the starting point? What could be, I will say, the challenge that we will discover on the customer environment based on maybe some customization done directly by the customer or by your partner that is not fully aligned with the expectation on our environment. So it's really a collaborative work between IDBS and the customer. So we have an Oracle script that will provide all the information regarding the database, so all the parameters. There is some other information that should be provided by some expert of our product on customer side. So additionally, workbook information that are not retrieved by the Oracle script. There is some inventory information that we would like have also to have a nice understanding of the usage of our platform. So of course, if the customer uses inventory, there is really few customers that use inventory on-premise, but there is some of them. And there is also a part related to the integration. So there is some integration that are done by IDBS, but also some other integration done by our partner. Could be also custom dev done by the customer, some partner, also by IDBS. If there is any exchange between our E-WorkBook inventory solution and other customer system. So again, all of that is to identify all the additional steps that we have to do on during the pivot project to be sure that when the customer moves from on-premise to SaaS, the system continues to work as it was previously. What is expected from the customer? First one, have access to their environment, to their prod environment. So they need to have a DBA resource that is able to run the script. So there is a little warning about temporary table that is created and that is removed at the end of the execution. So this is a warning for GXP customers. So we need to talk about that with any GXP customer because sometimes it could be a little bit tricky to create temporary table and remove it at the end. And what we need also from the customer side, it's a resource that has a full understanding of the usage of the IDBS product. So we need them. So again, it's a collaborative approach between IDBS and the customer. Nobody except the customer knows how they use our product.
Okay, so here are some technical points that need to be considered, if they have been highlighted in the technical discovery reports. And the first one is around desktop client usage for experiment creation and data capture. So if the customer is heavily reliant on the desktop client, we have to put in place projects basically to put them to the web clients, because the desktop client is really meant to be an administration tool, and there are several risks in continuing to use it for experiment creation on the cloud. Okay. Then the upgrade to the latest version has to be considered as well, because this is going to bring additional features, additional elements to the users that may be even more disruptive than the actual move to the cloud. So those new features will have to be reviewed, and we need to understand what will be the impact on the customer workflow. Then you've got the integrations, and we've listed here a few, like direct database access, could be E-WorkBook or internal databases. It could be instruments integration, label printing through Bartender, or any additional custom integration. So in order we basically need to understand how those integrations will work on the cloud after the data migration, to make sure that we can mitigate differences again, either through different way of accessing those internal environments or using other type of integration. If the customer is a chemistry user, they probably have a registration environment, which may be internal or external, maybe in the cloud. So again, this will have to be reviewed. And same thing for the lookup system, which are used for like a region lookup, which may be also internal databases. The inventory part is property consolidation is actually coming from that section. The new features that are added with higher version of the products, and this property consolidation has been added to version 24.3, I believe, and this has a major impact from if the customer is using it on the lower version, coming to the latest. This would have a major impact on the way that they manage property. So again, the impact of this has to be reviewed and make sure that we understand how they can manage it. There are other mitigation that needs to be discussed as well, like the links, web links, the items are static, and these are pointing to on-premise, the on-premise E-WorkBook or inventory. They won't be updated when they move to the cloud. That's something that needs to be agreed with the customer. The fonts, we have a number of fonts that are compatible on the web. If the customer is using custom fonts, and that was the case a couple of years ago, we had a very large customer, then moving to the cloud meant that the PDF generation, for example, was a little bit different from what they expected. So again, this is something that we need to be reviewed if they use something that is not out of the ordinary fonts that we are moving about. Okay. So regarding project governance, methodology that we use has been implemented in many other customers, large and small, whether GXP or non-GXP. It's all based on a sequential process where at every step we are reviewing and approving the steps before that. And because there are so many stakeholders involved and different people that needs to be added to the project, we typically use a Jira board to track the activities of everyone and make sure that they know what they're expected to do. So the people that are required to deliver this project on the IDBS, we've got the project manager and the technical leads, who are usually from the services team, and then additional technical people on the SLE who are managing the web environment and the support. On the customer side, we need also technical people like the DBA who will take care of the export of the database. Infrastructure key people that will be there to handle things like SSO or the network configuration, but also the business stakeholders will be also quite important to involve to make sure that they can test and make sure that everything is as per expectation after the line. On the customer side, there's also the sponsor. Sponsor typically is the one who pays for this project. He has some usually very specific goals about what he wants to achieve out of migration to the cloud, and we need to make sure that we understand what they are and we are meeting those objectives.
So, as mentioning, it's a process that we have run several times. So more than 20 customers already pivot from on-premise to SaaS. So we have created, obviously we have tried to standardize our mechanism to do that. So what is really important of this type of project is to be ready on what we call the final prod run. So more or less, so when you do this type of project, so at one point you decide to move from on-premise to SaaS all your users. So that means that you have a short windows where you have to do all the pivot tasks and be sure that, for example, if the user continue to use the on-premise environment on the Friday, so when they come back on the Monday, so they can continue to use their business as usual, but instead of your link, it's an on-premise system, so they are linked with the SaaS environment. So to be ready, what we do, we will do some dry run. So it could be one dry run or several dry run. So there is some environment questionnaire at the beginning. So what we call the OBQ. So that should be completed by the customer. So OBQ is onboarding questionnaire. So we provide some information about the environment, that network, that is expected. All the things like that. So IDBS will create a blank environment. So we will set up all the information that needed. So the IP, the VPN. So it's a collaboration between the IDBS and the customer. Then the customer will provide us an export of their on-premise database. We will move this copy on on a S3 bucket that will allow IDBS to take this file, import the file on the blank environment. Then IDBS will automatically upgrade the environment to the latest release of our product. We will perform some IQ, OQ if needed. And then at this stage, so the customer will be able to start their UAT, perform a PQ if needed. And IDBS and the customer will prepare all the documentation or the process documentation expected by the customers. So we will do that one time or several times. And when we will be ready, so we will be able to perform exactly the same process for the final run. So we will create a dedicated environment for the prod and perform again all the tasks. What is important at the end for the prod environment is the go live, where all the end user will move to the prod environment. So we need to be ready at this stage. Then, depending on the size of the database, more or less, if the database is less than 1 terabyte, we will be able to proceed on this way. So create a data pump, so an export of the on-premise database and import it on the IDBS environment. There is a lot of question about, okay, should we have on the SaaS environment, on the dev SaaS environment, the data that come from the dev on-premise environment, or should we have the prod environment? So it's all the discussions that we will have at the beginning of the project, or sometime during the SOW creation. So we will take all the decision about that, and we will perform so the move of the data as it's expected and relevant for the customer. So this is a case of small and medium Oracle database, so more than 1 terabyte. When it's more than 1 terabyte, so we need to use another mechanism. So more or less, it's related with the time that we need to copy the data. So we will use an Oracle mechanism that is named Golden Gate. So again, so if we do that, so we will talk about this approach more in detail with the customer. So what do Golden Gates? We will perform an export of the database. We will import it at a specific date. And then we will continue to work on the project. And during this period, so more or less every day, so the gap, so all the new data will be moved from the on-premise to the SaaS environment. So why we do that? Just to be sure that when we do the final shift, so the last the prod pivot, we minimize the time. So a customer can't have their system shut down during a week. So more or less, it could be a day or a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days maximum, but it could be a week or 2 weeks. So if it's really large database, so the time that we need to export the data and import will be too huge. So we need to use this Golden Gate mechanism.
Okay, so I'm going to accelerate because we don't have a lot of time. This shows the process. Like if you take an example where we've got a test and a prod environment, and we start with migrating the production on-premise data to create an evaluation of the environment, which will be the new test, basically. Once the evaluation has been run through and tested and agreed that everything works correctly, then we can prepare the prod environment, again, copying that on-prem data to this new prod cloud environment, which will be the final run. The migration of the test environment could be seen as a dry run, and then the final run would be the migration of the prod data. You have to consider that in between this time, if you have any spreadsheets that are being developed, right, and the business are expecting those spreadsheets to be delivered, the question is whether this is going to happen after the go live or before. If it's after the go live, they will need to be deployed or developed on the cloud system because they will be deployed on the new cloud. If they need to be deployed before the go live, then they need to be developed on the on-premise test environment, and then move to the on-premise cloud before the migration. That means that those changes on the on-premise test will not be on the cloud, right? Because they have been developed while the cloud environment is already running. So those are little gaps that you have to be aware of once you know the calendar of how you want to organize your migration. And also it means that you have to make the gaps between the test migration and the prod migration as close as possible. Otherwise, you're going to accumulate those differences that may be happening. Very quickly, the deliverables that we are expecting. Typically in a pivot project, every pivot is slightly different, so we can expect more or less. But typically, we will deliver obviously the cloud environments, the on-prem databases, Oracle and Mongo, that will be important to the cloud environment. We'll deliver some housekeeping tasks. We've got scripts that are fixing some issues like the special characters, removing them where they shouldn't be, and adding a part where it was null before. So we run those scripts. The great environment, the latest version, the required version, will help the customer going through the SSO configuration, library printing, and so on. Will help the customer through the acceptance testing and potentially any other activities that are required as part of the scope of the project. As Arnaud mentioned, potentially there is also a Golden Gate setup activity that needs to be delivered. And for GXP customers, we create additional reports regarding data migration and script execution, plus the IQQ that will be delivered on the two environments. And typically, this is the schedule that we're looking at. Once the IQQ has been submitted, we have a couple of weeks to set up the environment, and meaning the free, let's say, the dev, val, prod in this case, at not GXP, the free environment will be set up in those 2 weeks. Then we start with dev. We take a week to import the data and run our scripts. Then for a couple of weeks, customer will test it and make sure that everything's okay. At that stage, we need to start setting up the Golden Gate, but this is a quite lengthy process, and we give ourselves about 4 to 5 weeks to do this. In this example, once the Golden Gate has been set up and we've got this synchronized database that we are hosting, then we can clone this database and create the val dry run that we're going to upgrade. Then the customer will be able to test it. If everything's okay, then we do the final run of the val, which will have an IQQ element as well. Then on that final run, the PQ will be executed by the customer. That usually takes a little bit of time, 4 weeks in this case. Once the PQ has been executed, then we can schedule the prod execution, which can be delivered in a week. So this is quite an aggressive timeline. A lot of it will depend on how much testing is required, how much time it takes to sign off documents, and so on. But we can deliver this at that time.
So lesson learned on the more or less on the 20-year on-premise to SaaS pivot that we already done. So one part is the importance of the involvement of people. So people that come from the customer IT is really critical. So we expect to have some input, some work done by the customer IT on the network, on the whitelisting, on the VPN, on the firewall. So everything that is related with the security on the network is very important. Also, we need the configuration of the IDP on the SSO, and all the authentication parameters that we have on the cloud environment is also really critical at this stage. So we have to work on this area. We have also all the QA team. So for any GXP agreement. So we need to clarify it before we start the project. Of course, we need to put it on our agenda, on our calendar. So it's really important to understand what is expected in terms of GXP, the customer GXP. Also, I will say more on the business side. So we need to talk with them with the impact of the desktop client usage. So we have some customers that continue to use the desktop client. So that is normally not possible anymore on the SaaS environment. So we have to identify this software and see how we can mitigate that. What is expected from the business is clear use case. So having the use case in front of the project will help us to understand what should be tested. And we need also to consider everything that is related with the customization and the integration with the customer.
Okay, this is the final slide. We're on the post-project. Well done. You're on the cloud. The project is completed. Next step is to hand over to the support, and any upgrades will be discussed through either the CSM, if you've got one on the account, or through the cloud support team. The thing, however, that needs still to be considered is how we will support you going forward with the cloud environments. And I mentioned before the cloud value gap, the fact that you're getting new features, upgrades, you're getting changes on the platform. Typically, we see that some customers do not update the way that they work with the system, right? Meaning that there is a gap between what we deliver, what they are paying for, and how they use it, which can be, using all the processes. So in order to reduce this value gap and make sure that you make the most value out of your cloud environment, we, as IDBS services, can help you with deployment of new modules that may be part of your license, like request or inventory or other modules, the accelerators that may be deployed, or access to the data backbone that will enable you to take the data out of your environment and run reports or analytics or any additional activities. That's it. Stop it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I stop sharing and stop. Stop.
We have a question. I think we've got time for the question for our coffee break. We break a little bit.
Did you learn anything there?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of it in you already.
No, I think it's about preventing maybe.
Yeah, a bit of a tricky.
Thank you for this dry run. So now you can ask the customer to come.
I learned a lot of things.
Okay.
Good overview
All right.
on
Right.
the process that I'm new to this.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it was useful to you. Yeah.
Thank you.